Making a video game sequel is an arduous task. Compared to the games which preceded them, sequels have significantly increased expectations regarding the scale of their stories and the depth of their gameplay. Developers must subvert and surpass the player's expectations in order to achieve the same level of praise as for their previous game. These expectations are only further heightened in the case of a long-running series with an illustrious pedigree whose prequel was a redefinition not only of that series, but of what open-world games could be. But somehow, despite near-inconceivable odds, the developers at Nintendo have once again shattered expectations and produced one of the most enjoyable video game experiences of all time. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is the long-awaited sequel to 2017's Breath of the Wild, and it's been quite the journey to reach this moment. The game was first announced at E3 2019, was delayed in March 2022, though we now know it was essentially complete at that time, and only had its name revealed last September. But as I'm writing this, the game has been out for 2 months after releasing to critical acclaim, selling 10 million copies in its first 3 days, and on a personal note, becoming one of my favorite games of all time. In this video, I'd like to go over everything I loved about the game, some complaints I had, and where I think the franchise should go from here. I was never a Zelda kid. I grew up with Pokemon and Mario games, and was the perfect age at the perfect time for games like Minecraft and Terraria to take over my life. The first Zelda game I ever played was Breath of the Wild, and the first one I actually finished was Link's Awakening. I only finished Breath of the Wild this year, despite how much I adore the game after 4 years of picking it up, putting it down, forgetting about it for a while, and starting all over again. But when Nintendo announced Tears of the Kingdom, I was extremely excited to be on the ground floor of a new Zelda game and experience it simultaneously with the rest of the world. In the lead up to Tears of the Kingdom's release, fans were nervous that the gameplay would be too similar to that of Breath of the Wild, and realizing this, Nintendo released an 11-minute gameplay presentation with the producer Eiji Aonuma. This presentation did an excellent job of assuring players Tears of the Kingdom was more than just Breath of the Wild DLC, showcasing the game's 4 main mechanics, with 2 in particular, Fuse and Ultra Hand, sparking excitement online. The ability to attach any object to any weapon with Fuse would likely open an extraordinary array of possibilities, but Ultra Hand, which would allow players to stick together any number of objects in the world, had people even more excited. Flash forward to release day, and within hours people are posting clips of their Ultra Hand creations. Some incredible feats of engineering and others interesting. My main concern with the Ultra Hand ability was how complicated it would be to use, but after using it a few times I got the hang of it. The ability can be used on pretty much any object in the environment, meaning there were always materials around. However, its true power comes from Zonai devices, which use Link's Duracell battery belt for power. These Zonai devices range from fans and wheels to bombs, cannons, and flamethrowers, and could be obtained from Zonai dispensers, which are a great way to feed your crippling gacha addiction without putting yourself $1,000 in the hole. The most impressive of these Zonai devices, however, is the steering stick. No matter what you attach to your contraption, if you slap on a steering stick, it will control all of it, and that just blew my mind. Using the Ultra Hand ability to solve shrine puzzles and speed through the Hyrule skies on an air bike I made myself was extremely fun. Ultra Hand was also useful even if you weren't gluing any objects together, since it then basically acted like Breath of the Wild's magnesis, except every type of object could be moved instead of just metal. The auto build ability was also an extremely useful tool, as it allowed you to save designs you've made with Ultra Hand and recreate them later with the push of a button, as long as you either have the required materials around you or enough Zonite to craft it. When I first saw the Fuse ability on display, I thought it might be the perfect middle ground for weapon durability, which was one of the most divisive aspects of Breath of the Wild. I myself was not bothered by weapon durability, since even though it was frustrating when a weapon would break mid-fight, I appreciated that it resulted in me using weapons I might have otherwise just left to rot in my inventory. However, while the fusibility does offer a slight fix for weapon durability by increasing it when an item is fused to a weapon, it comes at the cost of losing 2 items instead of 1 when your weapon finally breaks. The best thing about the fusibility is how it allows you to create your own elemental weapons and weapons with unique effects on the fly. Some special shield fusions, like minecarts and rockets, prove very useful for traversal, and my personal favourite were arrow fusions, which solved the problem I had in Breath of the Wild, where I'd run out of regular arrows and only have rare elemental arrows left. Now all arrows you collect are regular arrows, and you can customize them to not only which element you want, but how strong you want the elemental attack to be.
I fused a mushroom to my shield.
Recall and Ascent offer great utility for exploring and puzzle solving, and in particular, I love being able to just ascend through a cave to the top of a mountain or to the surface, instead of having to climb it. I thought that was a really bold change, since climbing was such a large part of Breath of the Wild's gameplay. In the lead up to release, I was nervous that I'd end up missing the 4 main Sheikah Slate abilities from Breath of the Wild, but after a short time with Tears of the Kingdom, I was really happy with how fresh these new abilities felt, and it became difficult to imagine playing without them. The dungeons in Tears of the Kingdom felt like an improvement over Breath of the Wild's Divine Beasts, and the style of each temple and its boss fight felt unique, but still not to the same level as those of past Zelda games. The puzzles and temples were alright, but I found that I enjoyed the journey to get to the temples more than the puzzles inside them. However, Tears of the Kingdom's shrines were a major highlight for me, and they felt like a massive improvement over their Breath of the Wild counterparts. It felt like there was much more variety to them, from those requiring you to create Ultra Hand devices with the objects available to you, to combat trials that took away all your items and made you fight with what weapons were within the shrine itself. Those combat trials in particular were much more enjoyable than those in Breath of the Wild, which I found got repetitive with the enemies you had to fight and the one-on-one combat they put you in. With how great these new gameplay mechanics felt, and how well they all worked together, I wondered how I'd ever be able to play Breath of the Wild again. In my mind, I thought its mechanics would feel primitive in comparison, and that it would feel like a chore to explore Hyrule without being able to get on my Ultra Hand Sky Scooter and zoom through the air. However, as I'll discuss at the end of the next section, I finally realised how perfectly Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom complement each other. Another concern players had before Tears of the Kingdom released was its world map. Breath of the Wild was, at its core, a game about exploration, and the fact that its sequel was going to be set in the same Hyrule was enough to have players worried. Would Breath of the Wild's wonder of exploration be lost in Tears of the Kingdom? If we're in the same Hyrule, will there be anything new to explore? Not only did Tears of the Kingdom change the overworld of Hyrule to make it feel like it had evolved since the end of Breath of the Wild, and expand the world to include the skies above Hyrule, but it also added an equally massive underground world to explore. The first time I dove into the depths, I was in complete shock, not only that they were even a thing, but also that this massive component of Tears of the Kingdom was essentially kept secret all the way up to launch. The depths are entirely pitch black, and you light up areas one by activating light routes, each corresponding to a shrine in the overworld. The depths themselves are also a flipped map of the overworld, so all mountains on the overworld are deep craters in the depths. This mysterious underworld also holds some of the most intriguing mysteries and treasures in Tears of the Kingdom, ranging from ancient statues and mines to the amiibo outfits from Breath of the Wild. The enemies in the area are also infected with the gloom, a substance that drains the life from whomever it touches. If an enemy hits you with the gloom, your max hearts will be temporarily reduced. The depths contain massive pools of gloom, which add an extra element of danger to exploring them. Down in the depths, you also find that the Yiga clan has rebuilt themselves and have been experimenting with Ultra Hand contraptions of their own, in an attempt to find the powerful auto-build ability and bestow that power to Ganondorf. The fights with Master Koga in the depths were some of the most fun in the game, as he used different vehicles to try and beat you, and you could hijack him GTA style and give him a taste of his own medicine. I also love the fact that after he falls down the hole in Breath of the Wild, he ends up just living in the depths for the years between the two games. The Sky Islands proved to be a refreshing contrast to the large-scale exploration in the overworld and depths, consisting mostly of puzzles and boss fights. Every Sky Island I visited had something to do, and while I spent less time in the Sky Islands than I'd expected to, I enjoyed the challenges they offered. Also, the fact that you could dive from the highest Sky Island straight down to the depths with no loading screens is insane considering the hardware limitations. One of my favorite aspects of the overworld were the stables. I found myself spending much more time at each one than I would have in Breath of the Wild, and they felt much more important. Each stable felt like a hub for activity, with NPCs coming in and out. The newspaper questline also added some more importance to the stables, since there was something going on at each one to report on. The pony points were a welcome addition, as they added a nice sense of progression, making engaging with the stable ecosystem more worthwhile. I was also so happy when I went to one for the first time and saw that my horses from Breath of the Wild had been carried over. After playing through a few hours of Tears of the Kingdom, my worries about the exploration aspect of the game not being fulfilling were gone, and I realized how this game and Breath of the Wild perfectly complement each other. Exploration, as excellent as it is not the main focus of Tears of the Kingdom. As much as Breath of the Wild is a game about exploration, Tears of the Kingdom is about experimentation. Tears of the Kingdom streamlines what was a challenge in Breath of the Wild, like traveling long distances and scaling mountains. Instead, it makes the challenge figuring out how you get there, whether it's shooting yourself up in the sky and gliding, creating an elaborate vehicle to traverse the land or air, or some other means. The reason why these two games complement each other so well is that for those looking for a more grounded adventure experience, pun intended, Breath of the Wild fills that slot, while Tears of the Kingdom blows the open world sandbox wide open, giving the player room for even more creative expression and trial and error. Now we've come to the part of the video where there will be some story spoilers for Tears of the Kingdom. If you want to avoid them, skip to the timestamp on the screen. Tears of the Kingdom is undoubtedly a sequel to Breath of the Wild. It is located in the same Hyrule and takes place about 5 years later. However, in terms of continuing a storyline or any other through lines from its predecessor, Tears of the Kingdom just kinda doesn't? This seems to be completely intentional, as Nintendo likely wants to walk the line of connecting this new game to their previous smash hit to capture existing players, whilst not alienating newcomers to the franchise. Does this method completely work? No, not really. Both games have pretty contained stories, but in Tears of the Kingdom, some of Breath of the Wild's elements are strangely absent. For example, the 4 massive divine beasts, all the guardians, and almost all other Sheikah technology from Breath of the Wild are just completely gone. They just vanished. The upheaval could have removed these from existence, but even so, it would still be strange that nobody mentions these giant contraptions just suddenly being gone, or even acknowledges their existence in the first place. Some characters, like Hetsu, don't remember who Link is, while pretty much all the main characters do. It's especially weird, since Link didn't just meet these people that don't remember him on his previous journey. He saved the entire kingdom of Hyrule from Calamity Ganon. Hetsu not remembering Link hurts the most, because I gathered about 1,000,000 pieces of golden shit for him in Breath of the Wild, and the least he could do is remember my name. Anyway, moving on to the main story of Tears of the Kingdom itself, I thought it was great. Witnessing what Zelda had to live through as she was transported to the past was heartbreaking, as she watched everyone in the past that she knew and loved die, just as she would have 100 years before Breath of the Wild. The sacrifices she makes in order to help Link defeat Ganondorf once and for all were truly heroic. The story played out mainly through the Dragon Tears, which were this game's version of memories. I did look up a map of the order in which to watch the Dragon Tears, since I wanted to feel the full impact of the story and not spoil myself, and I really recommend doing so. Some of the moments in the story were quite emotional, having witnessed Zelda's journey in order. I really don't understand why they didn't just make it so that no matter what order you found it in, it showed the correct order of the cutscenes, but Nintendo gonna Nintendo. I don't want to spoil any more of the story beyond what I've already shared. If you want to watch a video on the story, there are plenty of those on YouTube, from just straight up watching the cutscenes to full playthroughs to hour-long video essays exploring the lore of the game, so knock yourself out with that. In this section, I just want to go over some stuff I loved about this game that I didn't get to mention in the other sections. I loved the Great Fairy questline with the Stable Trotters. They're a travelling band of musicians who have split up, and their band leader is trying to reunite the band to reawaken the four Great Fairies. Travelling to different stables and helping the band members with their quests in order to reunite them was really enjoyable, and hearing the evolution of their song as new instruments were added was really jolly. When I reunited the whole band and they played their song all together to reawaken the final Great Fairy, I had a big dumb smile on my face. They also played the stable theme at the stables you found each member at, and I thought that was a really nice detail. This next one's a minor detail, but it had a great impact on me when I was playing. The jingle that plays when you solve a puzzle, open a door, or reach a platform gave me such a dopamine rush, but it represents possibly the greatest thing about this game, and that's the same experimentation I was talking about before. The fact that it's possible that the way you solve a puzzle in this game is completely 100% unique to you is what this game does best. You can solve any puzzle in this game by doing it your own way, and the fact that the developers have enough faith in their players to not hold their hand and let creativity flow is something that not many AAA games do nowadays, and it was truly refreshing. I thought the bosses in this game had much more variety than in Breath of the Wild, and in particular I enjoyed fighting the Flux constructs, since you essentially used all your hand abilities in the fight as opposed to just using your weapons. It was really fun to pull them apart block by block using Ultra Hand. And although I spoke about it before already, and it's kinda not within the game itself, it's actually been incredible seeing all the creativity that has come out of this game, and with how many years after Breath of the Wild's release people were still finding new things, I think the creativity will last for a long time. Anyway, let's speed through the other things I loved about this game. Building a house, the final boss fight, the music, the ending, and finally, the fact that this game is able to run at all on the nearly 7-year-old console it released on. Insane. I've just got one major complaint and then we'll speed through the rest of them. The sages were a real letdown in this game. This was the one area that I felt was a downgrade from Breath of the Wild. Instead of just being mapped to a button or action like the champions were, you instead have to go up to the embodiment of the sage, press ready on them, then press a button again to have them perform their ability, which felt really clunky. Tulin was great for giving an extra boost while you were gliding, but the other three just kind of felt useless. Like, I get that Rivali's Gale wouldn't make much sense now since you can just fuse a rocket to your shield, but Mipha's Grace and Daruk's Protection were really useful, and could still have been very useful. I never used Urbosa's Fury much in Breath of the Wild, but Regia's Power of Lightning just felt like a worse version, since now you have to wait for it to charge up. In a game where everything else felt like it had so much thought put into each minute detail, the sages felt like a real oversight and were quite disappointing. Anyway, here's the rest. How many damn Korok seeds there are. The UI still feels a bit outdated. Seriously? 1,000 of them? Why are there so many? The performance isn't the best. How did you lose all of these Korok seeds again, you fool? And finally, I lied. I have another big complaint. My biggest complaint about Tears of the Kingdom? Where the hell is Cass? Where the f*** is he, Nintendo? He was my favorite character in Breath of the Wild. When I'd find him, he'd make me so happy, and his theme has become one of my favorite pieces of video game music. Why is he not in the game? What's your excuse? It's not like he died or anything. He could have been in Rito Village with his family. You even teased me with his existence, but you don't put him in? What is wrong with you people? Of course, if he's in the DLC that Tears of the Kingdom is obviously gonna get, I will be a bit less upset. So do the right thing, Nintendo. Do the right thing. After finishing The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, I began to think about what I'd want to see out of the Zelda series next. Should they continue the Breath of the Wild formula, or revolutionize another genre entirely? I struggle to think how Nintendo could possibly expand on open world Zelda's ideas to make an even more incredible gameplay experience, but I also felt that way when playing Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom still managed to blow my expectations out the water. I personally want to see them take a franchise in a new direction, maybe as a Souls or roguelike, but whatever happens next with this franchise, I'm pretty sure I'll be there on day one. This is truly a masterpiece of a game. and it is unfathomable that it managed to exceed the expectations set of it as a sequel to one of the greatest games ever made. From the sky down to the depths, Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is a masterpiece in open world game design, with a phenomenal soundtrack, an excellent and approachable story, and gameplay that rewards the player for creativity. I give this game a perfect 1000 out of 1000 Korok seeds. Seriously, why are there so many? Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, subscribe for more videos in the future, and let me know not only what you thought about Tears of the Kingdom, but what you would like to see the Zelda franchise do next. Until next time, have a fantastic day, go play some Zelda, and stay safe.